Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pisgah Podcast.
Thank you again for listening to Pisgah. We are your hosts. I'm Drew, that's Mangler, and we're coming to you live from Smoker's Cove.
This is probably my favorite parking lot to eat snacks in.
It's where they all start and end, it seems like, for me. So Mangler, how was your past week?
Fairly similar to the one before. I've had 4 COVID tests and my back is still jacked up, so lots of chilling and relaxing, trying to get my back ready to ride some bikes. You know, the weather hasn't been the best for bike riding anyway, so it's kind of been a good time to lay low and stoke the wood stove a little bit.
10-4 to that, yeah, same here. I've just added a few mountain bike videos that I come across on Pink Bike or Vital MTB to help kind of scratch my itch.
I try to, get some web videos going, but I want full lengths. I think we need some more full length mountain bike videos to drop this time of year every year. Like, this seems to be the prime time to drop some full length mountain bike edits on us. So all you content creators out there, start filming for next winter. That'd be really awesome.
Yeah, think about the longer than the Instagram length clip. Yeah, I've really enjoyed some series stuff, though, that are a compilation of things building up to one.
Yeah, I mean, there's always web series and stuff. And like the stuff Nico's been doing with his web series stuff has been pretty entertaining.
Yeah, that's good. And Matt Jones is one that I've been checking out. So, yeah, there's some cool stuff, people building up to things and watching people progress. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but I still think the full-length mountain bike video, it's slowed down a lot. I mean, I get it. Those take a lot of time and, most importantly, money to make. But I feel like it's something that the industry and the consumer wants.
For sure, yeah. I love all the Anthill Films stuff, full length, feature length. It's worthy. It's worth the cost that it takes to pay for it, and it's not just something that you're gonna click on for free because it came up in your Pink Bike feed.
Ah, for sure. For this week's episode, we had the chance to get one of Pisgah Area Sorba's new board members on the mic. Daniel Sapp is a longtime friend. He's probably one of the main reasons that I'm riding mountain bikes, so you can blame him for hearing my voice in mountain biking. But yeah, it was great to sit him down, talk a little bit about what Pisgah Area Sorba has going on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing this.
All right, yeah, so here we go. All right, Daniel, welcome to the Pisgah Podcast. If you would kind of give us a rundown of who you are and what you're up to.
My name's Daniel Sapp. I live here in Brevard in western North Carolina, and I've been riding mountain bikes in this area since I was 12 years old. I started coming up here and going to camp. I went to Camp Toccoa, and they took us out on the trails in Pisgah, and then in DuPont later on after that, as you know, that was right at the start of DuPont being a place you could even go ride mountain bikes. And I've kind of been coming up here ever since. I went to college in Boone at Appalachian State. Spent more of my time riding bikes up there than I probably should have, but it worked out all right for me. And then I've been down here in the Asheville Brevard area ever since, essentially, minus a couple little trips here and there and whatnot.
Daniel, you've recently taken on a volunteer role on top of your professional job duties working as part of the editorial team with Pink Bike. So what is this new volunteering position that you've grabbed a hold of?
There was an opening and there was a need for someone to jump on board with Pisgah Area Sorba, and there were a few open positions, and I just so wound up in one of the vice president positions. We have a first vice president and a second vice president, and so I'm the first vice president, and Doug Miller, who's also a Boone App State graduate and Brevard local, he is the second vice president. So we've got a lot of new blood on the board of directors for Pisgah Area Sorba.
Daniel, what all does Pisgah Area Sorba cover?
So Pisgah Area Sorba is covering, if you want to just look at a map, take all the mountain bike trails from the Black Mountain area all the way over to Brevard and then draw a line up to Canton and, kind of put that in a big pool, and that's what Pisgah area Sorba is working with and covering. And so in that, you've got Brevard, the North Mills River area, Bent Creek, the Asheville area, and then Canton. And Canton is the site of the newest project, and that is a collaboration between Pisgah area Sorba, Seth Alvo, who runs Seth's Bike Hacks, um, the town of Canton, and the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, and along with some other folks. And that's a cool new park that's being built. I think you did an episode on that recently, right, Michael?
Yeah, we had that a couple episodes ago. Mostly it was focusing on Burn Park, which was the section that Seth was going to be focusing on. And
Exactly.
future episode, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the rest of the park when that information is ready.
Yeah, it's going to be a really cool place to go ride. The Burn Park component of it's just only part of the whole equation, and it's really cool to see new trails coming to the area, and communities getting behind them. The town of Canton's just totally all in on that, and they've been really awesome to work with on our end. And it's great to see them understanding that trails are bringing people and tourism dollars and creating jobs and creating industry, and really increasing the quality of life for people that live here.
We hear a lot about Pisgah area Sorba, but how does that differ from Sorba?
So Pisgah area Sorba is just encompassing a lot of trails and land in the whole Western North Carolina region, or part of the Western North Carolina region. There's another chapter, the Northwest North Carolina Mountain Bike Alliance, that's a little bit further northeast of us. But Sorba encompasses a lot of trails in the entire southeast. And so Sorba's been around since 1989. And it started, just as a smaller organization. But at this point, there's 48 chapters, just like Pisgah area Sorba, that work in their local areas with their land managers and other organizations to build and maintain trails and bike parks and whatever else. And so all these Sorba and all the chapters are 501c organizations. And so, they're completely funded by donations and, volunteer work, really. There's chapters for Sorba in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, obviously North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. So it's a whole lot of area that, under the guidance and direction of Sorba in working with land managers and others to create mountain bike opportunities.
That's a good amount of land coverage right there.
It really is. And, there are a few chapters within Sorba that have paid executive directors. The chapter in the Knoxville, Tennessee area is a great one as an example. But Pisgah area Sorba is totally based off of volunteer work. The entire board of directors, all volunteers. No one's getting paid. We're just giving our time to try to make mountain biking in the area better. And I mean, the same for everyone that's doing trail work and volunteering their hours to be trail crew leaders and, putting their sweat equity back into the trails. No one's really getting paid for that when it comes to volunteer work.
I mean, it's one of those thankless jobs that goes without saying. I'm always thanking all the people I pass on the trail whenever they're doing trail work. I can't say thank you enough to every time I see Chuck Carlson.
Chuck does such an awesome job, and he's really just like a shining example of someone that's out and really getting after it. And, I don't think it's totally unreasonable. And I mean, you can't expect a lot of people or most people to do that. I mean, he's put in the time to not only just volunteer, but he's gotten really good at building trail.
Dude is a machine.
He is, man. And I think, even Nico and the guys at Canuga had him come out and do some building with them out there. And I think it turned into some pretty incredible rock work. What do you think? Have you ridden that?
Yeah, that's some of my favorite stuff. And when I saw Canuga post a photo of Chuck working on rocks, I was like, oh, okay. They just stepped it up a couple of notches.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, not to say that it wasn't great already, but it's like, oh, cool, Chuck's getting involved. There's going to be some rad rock work going on, and you just kind of know that, and it's cool to see.
Obviously, Pisgah area Sorba has a lot of volunteers, but as far as membership numbers, what are you guys looking at?
Well, we have, last I looked, a little over 500 members, and we kind of crested over 500, I believe, over like kind of around the start of this year, the start of 2021. And so, all things considered, as far as other chapters go, we do have a pretty good member base. But then if you look at how many people are actually coming up here and using the trails, and how much use and abuse our trails are getting. It's really the amount of members and the amount of horsepower and the amount of resources that we have to keep our trails up and running is, compared to the usage that they're getting, is we're way behind the curve on that.
If you had to guesstimate, I know I'm putting you on the spot, how many active mountain bikers would you say are in the Asheville, Pisgah area?
I don't know. I mean, you live up this way too. It's hard to say, but I mean, I could probably name 60 or 70 between here and the airport, right? I mean, I think, when you look at what is an active mountain biker, it's not necessarily your guy that's going out and, what's your stereotypical Western North Carolina mountain biker, right? They ride a transition patrol, they have industry 9 wheels and like some sort of apart from Cane Creek on their bike. And I mean, how many of those do you see out on any given Saturday? I mean, like probably 100 of them go through the hub for a beer after they go ride, right?
Yeah, well, here's the thing about that stereotypical rider that you just named is that's everyone within, a 200-mile radius of here now because they come here and they see that those bikes ride well here and those parts ride well here,
Exactly.
so they buy that stuff.
Yeah, but
So,
back to your question, when it comes down to like how many people actually ride in the greater Asheville area, and so greater Asheville, I think of being pretty much the district that Pisgah area Sorba has, as far as volunteer efforts and land management assistance and all of that going into. And so you like take Black Mountain, that triangle again, Black Mountain, Canton, Brevard, hundreds, easily hundreds. I mean, possibly thousands, because a couple thousand.
I'm guesstimating over 5,000.
You're right, because when you look at active riders, that's not the person that's going out and getting, they've got to get their ride in after work or their ride in before work, or they have to go out and ride all day on Saturday each and every weekend. Like there's a ton of people that are just out and they enjoy mountain biking and they don't have to have a, $7,000 bike to enjoy it. Like there's a lot of people that are just like recreational riders, and those are really the most important riders because they're the ones that, grow into a more passionate and more, more stoked, for a lack of better words, rider.
More passionate, more stoked, and most importantly, more engaged.
Yeah, a more engaged rider. And, you don't have to be super involved to get into mountain biking. Like, luckily, there's a ton of trails around here. Like, you can go ride Bent Creek, you can go to Colo, you can go to the Riveter and just cruise around. I mean, like, people that go to cruise the pump tracks and ride the jumps of the river, that everyone's a mountain biker. Pisgah area Sorba helps manage a lot of the relationships between the Forest Service, other governing bodies, other land managers, state and local government, and users. And those are relationships that are really difficult to manage because, mountain biking is, in the grand scheme of things, a very new use of the land. It's,
Oh, yeah.
it's very rapidly evolving. As fast as bikes are getting better and more efficient and more capable, the sport's also evolving. And, if we just look at the last year with COVID alone, the growth of the sport is out of control. I mean, it's huge. And
That's where my 5,000 number was
yeah,
assisted
I mean,
from.
that's definitely coming in with that. And, these relationships are very delicate at times, especially when it comes to land management. If just think of your own land, think of your backyard. Are you going to just let whoever come out there and build a trail? Probably not. Like you may say you're excited about it and everything, but when you start looking at the insurance and the liability and, things like that, and not to mention that, but you have other user groups and other things that have to be considered, like environmental impacts and, NEPA studies and archaeological stuff. Like, Pisgah didn't start, and I mean, this goes for places beyond Pisgah. Pisgah didn't start as a mountain biking place or a recreational place. Pisgah's around because it was, it was used for harvesting timber. And, it has evolved into what it is now, and we're just lucky enough to be able to use it and recreate on it. Pisgah was not built as a mountain biking destination. Pisgah is a national forest that exists in the region, and we are mountain biking on it.
That's a good way to put it. So recently, I've been seeing Pisgah area Sorba kind of put up proof of performance posts over the past couple months.
Trying to validate what we're doing, man.
Yeah, and it's been great to see because it's like we hear of Pisgah area sore, but unless we ride all the trails we can in a week, we're probably not going to see a lot of stuff being done.
Yeah.
And so seeing these posts talking about what they've been up to is good to see, and hopefully it's giving some people some justification and say, hey, they are out doing stuff in the forest. I should join to help them.
Yeah.
With what you guys have been up to, how's January been?
And January's been a good month. Historically, I mean, even with the weather and all of that, it's not been ideal for a lot of stuff, but we've managed to get some trail work done. And, we kind of go through, we start each month and have a bit of a checklist like, hey, here's our wish list. Here's, if everything works out perfectly, what we'd love to get done. And some months it's a lot, some months it's a little, because there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into getting everything done. It's not just going out and building trail or working on fixing a spot on a trail or whatever else. All of it has to be documented. And why does it matter that it's documented? Because all these volunteer hours that we're putting in, it goes towards recognizing what Pisgah Area Sorba is doing, giving us legitimacy and clout with land managers and governing bodies and so on and so forth. And in some cases, Pisgah Area Sorba works through getting grants a lot of times, and that's in order to do a lot of bigger projects. With those grants and the way some of those grants work, it's a very complicated system, and it's important to log volunteer hours because a lot of those hours are matched with money, and that's how grants sometimes in this case work, especially with some of the RTP grants and state level grants. But for January, if you've been out and ridden the Bennett Gap Trail in the past few weeks, or if you've ridden it ever, you would have noticed that at the bottom of it, where it comes into Avery Creek Road, there's a really, super swampy and wet spot many times, and it's typically one of the last places to dry on the trail. It's great. You just had a great ride, and then you trashed your bike in the last 25 feet of the trail in the mud.
That has happened to me so many times. Where it's like, oh, Bennett was in great shape. I nose bonked the rock, and then I'm in a mud pit.
Yeah, and I mean, you're like, coming out, it's like, oh, that was awesome, and then you're just like covered. You don't even have time to ride your bike, down the trail and beat more of the mud off of it or anything by hitting rocks and roots. It's just like, oh, cool. Where's the pressure washer? So a great crew of volunteers, trail crew leaders, Forest Service guys, and some folks with the Pisgah Conservancy went and made what we call a turnpike at the bottom. And essentially it's just some timbers cribbed in with rock and more earth material that raises everything up a little bit.
So you essentially made like an elevated trail surface.
Yeah, it looks like an elevated trail surface. It's really pretty. You would notice a few months ago there was one built up on the top, and there's a good crew of folks that went and put that in, and is up at a little swampy spot at the top before you drop into the trail kind of. And, I call it the prelude up there. It's like kind of where you're like, drop your heels and it's like, all right, I'm getting ready to go. But yeah, at the bottom. So that's all cribbed in, and it's awesome now. Keeps you dry. Did a lot of brush work and tree clearing on the Turkey Pin Gap Trail. And if you haven't ridden the Turkey Pin Gap Trail, you're not alone. And it may be something you never want to ride. It is a trail that is what many people would consider type 2 fun. And it connects from a little bit down what many people would consider Upper Black Mountain all the way over to the Turkey Pin trailhead area. And there's a ton of up, there's a ton of down. It's a beautiful trail, but it's a really hard trail. There's some spots in there, plenty of spots you're going to hike a bike. Like if you think the hike a bike up Black Mountain was bad, then it's like, no, you're just getting warmed up.
Doing Upper Black to Turkey Pin, you're doing some Pisgah shuffle.
Yeah, and it's awesome. Like if you've got a full day, highly recommend getting out there and checking that trail out because it's beautiful, but it's a full-on backcountry experience. Definitely have your wits about you, be able to ride well, and take plenty of stuff to get yourself in and out of the woods. But in that, with it being so far out there, getting trees out and doing brush work on a trail that far out is no easy task. And so we had a great crew of some of the board members and other volunteers head out there and do a little bit of work recently on that. I don't know how far they hiked that day, but I know they were coming out of the woods, around dark, and they had started around daylight. So yeah, solid day work there. We've done drainage repair on Greenslick, 2 full days repairing drainage issues on the Lower Black Mountain Trail. I think most people know what the Lower Black Mountain Trail is, but it had some pretty consistently wet spots that needed some work, and those are a lot better now.
Yeah, Lee and I rode that a couple weeks ago when I had him on the podcast. But I did take note of a lot of good new drainage work on Lower Black, and sections of the trail that had previously splashed me with water and mud didn't do it anymore. So that was nice.
Yeah, I know. I've not ridden down it in a while. I've been riding just really, weird routes. I rode up it a couple times recently, though. That's kind of one of my favorite morning. If I really want to get exercise in, I don't care as much about having fun. I'll ride up it and down Thrift and then ride Sycamore and all of that. But I was like, oh, this is pretty great right now. Right as I'm just like, tasting my breakfast come back up as I'm climbing up that trail. Other stuff that we did some drainage repair on Wolf Branch, cut a bunch of trees out in North Mills River that have fallen on the trails, drainage, rock armor work on Squirrel, cut out a few more trees on Cantrell Creek, which Cantrell Creek's a little bit newer trail. It's a reroute. We call it a reroute, but it's a completely new trail. The old trail was closed because of sedimentation and erosion issues, and Forest Service was nice enough to let there be a new trail built adjacent to it.
And I think it's starting to ride in really good.
It is. Man, I love climbing up Cantrell to ride Squirrel. I've not ridden down Cantrell yet. Have you?
Yeah, I think I've gone down it 2 or 3 times maybe, but usually I'm using it as a climbing trail.
Man, you've been spending a lot more time out there in Turkey Pen than I have. I think I need to get on it.
Yeah, you do.
But, all of that together adds up to over 350 volunteer hours that Pisgah Area Sorba volunteers, trail crew leaders, etc. logged during January, which is pretty substantial.
At first, it doesn't seem like a lot, but then as you start naming things off, and I start thinking in my head that the time that it takes to do a lot of those things,
Well,
Jesus, especially getting into do turkey pen stuff. Like,
Oh, yeah.
that's solid day with multiple people.
Yeah, carrying in saws and everything else you need. It's like, oh, trail work sounds really fun. Yeah, why don't you carry a like a real chainsaw, 10 miles on your back? It's not fun. You feel horrible.
That's legit mountain work right there.
It is. It is. Like, get strong, mountain fitness. Like, you don't need to go to the gym to do CrossFit. You need to build trail.
So January, solid performance there from you guys.
Yeah, I think it was really strong, especially, look back and think about the weather too. You have to think about the weather with all this. It wasn't perfect.
It's been a nasty January.
It has. It hasn't been the worst ever by any means, but it's not been the best either.
So what do you guys have on deck for February? I mean, the weather's kind of been more of the same, if not worse, but
For February, there's going to be a number of projects that are still continuing, and little minor or major fix-ups and make betters, as I'd like to call them, all over the forest. And a lot of that's going to be done with trail crew leader groups. In the past, historically, there have been a lot of big digs where, we have a ton of people come out, but with COVID, that is not something that we're doing right now. And it's really not always the most effective way to do things either. It's great for getting a lot of people together and getting a lot of people stoked on building trail. But what really happens is it takes a lot of time, and, it's good in getting like ditch work done and drains cleared and stuff like that. But when it comes down to getting like technical rock work done or, technical features installed, you don't necessarily always need a lot of people. You need the right people. That's where people like Chuck and, other really good trail crew leaders who know what they're doing, that's where those guys come in.
one project that's caught my attention lately is the Joel Branch connector that leads up to 475C. That's kind of one of those things that I feel like Pisgah has been missing for a while, because it's going to open up a lot of new, I'm not going to say easier or shorter opportunities, but it's going to
Definitely not shorter.
instead of having to do like a full like pavement route around to the hatchery to take 475C back to Bracken, you're going to get the same elevation and your distance is just going to be different. But I see that as a good half-day ride versus, going all the way over to the hatchery via 276 being a much longer day.
Right. And I mean, it's still a long ride. So what we're referring to, if you don't know, 475C is if you park at the fish hatchery, there's a road out the back. And if you're in Butter Gap, you kind of come into the very bottom of it. But that goes up and over that big mountain behind John Rock and everything. And it'll take you to Bracken Mountain, which drops you into downtown Brevard, essentially. It's if you've ridden Bracken Mountain, it's a steep machine-built single track that comes kind of right out of the music center in Brevard. And so historically, the way to access that has been from the fish hatchery. There is another road that is called Joel Branch Road. And Joel Branch starts right across the road from the bottom of Black Mountain, kind of out of the Davidson River campground and off the Estito Trail, the little gravel path that goes from Lowe's Home Improvement over to the campground. If you take Joel Branch Road, first off, it takes forever. And it's like the never-ending road's not in North Mills River. It is here.
It's Joel Branch.
And it's Joel Branch. Every time I ride it, I'm like, man, when's it going to end? But it's actually a really nice ride. And, it starts out fairly steep, but then you get some rolly stuff and you actually get some really awesome downhill. I use that term loosely, but some faster, flatter sections.
And your chances of seeing a bear are pretty good.
They are. I've not seen one up there myself, but I have heard many reports of people seeing them up there. I think you've seen some, right, Michael?
Yep, and lots of bear tracks.
Oh, yeah. Turkeys as well. Definitely seen some turkeys up there. So that road, first time I rode it, unbeknownst to me, it dead ends.
Yep, just like most of our forest roads.
It dead ends like, how many miles up is that? Probably like 6?
Yeah, it's like 6 or 7. So imagine doing claw hammer.
Yeah, claw hammer, but without all the nice gravel. Just like, riding through a field the whole time. It's really soft and, not very efficient. But it's actually a really great, road, except it dead ends. And so there's going to be a connector that takes the end of that road not very far over to 475C, which is the road that comes up from the back of the fish hatchery. And so that'll give you like kind of a shorter loop option to hook back into Bracken. I think you could probably loop that and it'd be 20 something miles from town when you incorporate the greenway and all of that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, rather than, I would bet it's closer to 30 if you go all the way to the hatchery.
Yeah.
And a lot of road miles.
Yeah, a lot of road miles. But let's be clear about 475C from the hatchery. It doesn't kind of go over the mountain. It takes the longest way around to go to over the mountain.
It's not bad in the sense that it's not so steep, but it just, you think it's like, oh, it's not that long. I'm going to do it in 45 minutes. Like, no, every single time it's like closer to an hour. Okay, 2 hours. It can get long. But, that goes to one of the cooler sections of single track that I think a lot of people probably don't know about, which is the backside of Bracken where it connects into 475C. That little bit of single track's a ton of fun.
That section of single track is interesting because you informed me earlier that's the newest piece of single track that's been built in Pisgah.
I think. Don't hold me to that, but I do think that is one of the newest, maybe the newest piece of single track that's been built. Yeah, that's not a reroute. So, let's take Spencer Branch and Cantrell. And, there's been a few other things here and there off the table with that.
I can't think of anything newer.
I can't either. And, I've been down here a long time. It's not really, trails have been redone, but not actually added to. So why don't we have new trails being built all the time in Pisgah? Well, it kind of goes back to where we were talking. The Forest Service Pisgah wasn't developed for recreation. It was developed for timber harvest. And the whole recreation thing is new. Everyone was focused on timber and then fire management. And so over the years, trail use has gone up, but whether it's people hiking, mountain biking, riding horses, getting down in there to fish, whatever. For a while, the Forest Service did gain more staff to help manage all of that. But, trail use has gone up exponentially. And in the past several years or the last, more than several years, and a lot of times Congress has cut funding for Forest Service trails. And that makes the trails pretty low on the priorities list. When you're just trying to pay staff to manage the forest, from an environmental and safety standpoint, managing recreational users really takes a back seat. And so with all of that, it's made the Forest Service staff really hesitant to add new trails because, look at the trails that we have. It's really difficult to maintain those. I get it. Even though a lot of people love trails kind of as they are, the Pisgah Trail, like what is the quintessential Pisgah Trail? I don't think anyone could describe it. They're all different. Everyone's like, oh, rough and raw, but Squirrel Gap is not necessarily rough and raw. It's just like this awesome bench cut single track. Middle Black Mountain is a ditch that just literally gets worse every year. And it's fun to ride sometimes. And then it rains. And I find myself like completely scared. And I see tons of people that, come up here to ride Pisgah and they're just walking their bike. there is no character for a trail around here because these trails were largely like fire breaks and not made for mountain biking.
They were timber extraction paths.
Exactly. Or, game pass or whatever else. There's a lot of history behind the trails here. If you ever want to look a lot of it up, there's more information at the Transylvania County Library and other places. That's a whole podcast in itself, or several.
We're working on it.
Good, because it's pretty cool. But, it takes, with all this, Forest Service staff is still cut down. And if you've ridden up Avery Creek Road, or from time to time, you'll see people who have camped out longer than the allotted 14 days or whatever it is, essentially like bum camps and so on and so forth. And it's sad, but a lot of that stuff just gets left and there's just trash everywhere. And, these people are getting run out or arrested for whatever reason. And the Forest Service and all their staffing efforts and, the law enforcement officers are just trying to curtail that and make the place safe. The last thing they have the bandwidth for really is adding new trails in a lot of cases.
Yeah, they do have a stacked plate given road maintenance, dealing with people overstaying, people not fishing properly, people not camping where they're supposed to. Like, the list goes on of all the responsibilities that the Forest Service has to deal with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, any given weekend, you look at any trash can anywhere around it, it's overflowing because, people
don't pack it out.
They don't pack it out. They just leave it because there's a trash can. I mean, but, or drive up by Looking Glass Trailhead or by Looking Glass Waterfall on a weekend. And, I think they're doing all they can do just to keep people from getting run over by cars because of, people just parking in the middle of everywhere and, acting crazy in general.
It's definitely become a zoo and they have their hands full.
With that, it takes local user groups like Pisgah Area Sorba and others to work with and convince the Forest Service that, hey, we can maintain these current trails, or we can work within your parameters to figure out something else in this situation where this current trail is not up to, expectation, or it's causing sedimentation issues or so on and so forth. And then see all that through the right channels with the proper environmental studies done, with trails built to the proper specs that, to where the trails will hold up for years instead of just turning into another issue that has to be maintained and take money to maintain. And, just like once we're able to do more and more of that, then they're going to be more likely to allow new projects. And, another reason that it takes a while for trails to happen is NEPA, which is an environmental study. And, it requires the Forest Service to study environmental impacts of prospective new trails and other changes on public lands. With that, then it allows the public a period of time to comment. And then you have to have environmental and cultural specialists come in and study everything, make sure there's no environmental concerns, archaeological concerns. There's a lot of old home sites. There are very historic things kind of hidden in the forest that no one really knows about, and the locations aren't published, obviously. They have to ensure there aren't going to be negative impacts from this trail being built there.
Yeah, so it's a lot to take in and a lot to study before you start putting shovels in the ground.
Yeah, and by the time you do that and have public comment periods and everything else, it takes time. But, hopefully this will get more into a groove and more into a system, and we're able to get a lot more rolling at once.
Do you think this Joel Branch Trail project is going to be kind of like a good Kickstarter for some momentum?
I hope so. I hope it's I don't think it's going to be one of the most heavily used trails, so I think it'll be pretty low impact. I know that it is out for bid right now. The Conservancy is kind of heading that up. It's a little bit more of their project that they're working with. Pisgah Area Sorba has a lot of other projects going on right now, and some really big ones in the works, actually, that we'll touch on in a later episode.
As a user, what's some of the best things that I or we can do to A, help the trails, and B, help Pisgah Area Sorba?
I think one of the biggest things that I personally think people can do is just be nice to other trail users. As mountain bikers, there's a lot of entitlement, and it's pretty unwarranted. It's not necessary, unless you're on a closed race course, which is never Pisgah. Even if you're racing in Pisgah, it's not a closed course. If you're at Canoga or something. And even then, it's just be nice to people. Everyone's just out trying to recreate. You don't own the trails. Like, we don't own the trails. Downhill users yield to uphill users. Everyone yields to hikers. Everyone yields to horses. It's, that getting mountain bikers painted in a lot more, positive light's a good thing. And, it's not all bad. Like, most mountain bikers are really nice. It's definitely a case of a few bad apples. And, lastly, and arguably most importantly, is like monetary donations. There's a lot of big projects that we aren't able to do with volunteer hours alone. We're hiring professional trail contractors to, the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars to build and reroute trail and put in new trail, and it's done very professionally and done really well in a way that, keeps the Forest Service happy. It keeps mountain bikers happy and makes an awesome place to ride. And we can't do that without funding.
Funding makes the world go round, and funding also helps pay for bike trails.
It does. And, a lot of local businesses have really gotten behind this. Some of the breweries, Liberty Cycles recently donated a pretty sizable check to Pisgah Area Sorba, and checks to a couple other organizations too, because they see the value in bikes in this area, and they see the value in bikes to their business. They realize that, they know that mountain bikers coming to the area are what's keeping their doors open, and that these trails are what mountain bikers are coming to the area for.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things that people can argue about with trail projects, and you can think that a trail doesn't need to be rerouted or this or that doesn't need to be done to it. But until you understand completely and have a more comprehensive picture of what's going on, at least be pretty supportive of the people trying to do all this. It's like mostly volunteer work. We don't have a paid executive director or anyone doing this. We're in meetings middle of the week, until 7-8 o'clock at night. And a lot of times we have messages going back between each other, at 6 a.m, trying to get all this stuff figured out and figure out ways to manage the trails around here. And we're not really getting anything out of it. So, a high five or words of encouragement instead of just fighting
and dumb comments on the internet.
Fighting and commenting on the internet about things you may not have a full picture of. That's not the best way to go about it. And, if someone does have an issue, we certainly welcome any feedback, and feel free to reach out. All of our emails are on the Pisgah Area Sorba website, and we're all easy to get in touch with. But before you just start commenting on a Facebook post or something on Instagram and getting people riled up, just reach out to us. We're all willing to talk, and we're all happy to talk, and there's a lot of good ideas out there, and we're not always, no one's always right at anything, but we're always open to criticism and always open to encouragement.
How else can someone get involved with Pisgah Area Sorba? Because right now you're not doing volunteer projects with the Big Dig and things like that. So what's a user to do?
Well, we are still doing some volunteer projects, but they're a lot smaller scale, and they're, just a few people with a trail crew leader. And we're always open to people reaching out to us, send us an email, and we can, if you've got some skills or got motivation to come out and do something, we can get you in touch with the right people. But with COVID, things are a little bit different right now. So, I'd encourage everyone to just join Pisgah Area Sorba to start with. That's one of the biggest things that you can do. You can join as an individual or as a family. And, there's a lot of membership benefits. Some may not be important to some people, but the biggest thing is like that money is going in to help trails here. It also goes into insurance and liability, and that's super boring. You're like, oh, my money's not going right to the trails. Right. But that kind of sets us apart from just being a random person in there. And the insurance coverage that we have to carry as an organization is super expensive, and it's a critical component of the membership.
I mean, the membership wouldn't be able to do the activities that it does without having that insurance and coverage.
No, and that's why we're able to, that's why as just a citizen, just a person, yes, you can go out and recreate on Forest Service land, but no, you cannot just go out and do trail work. In addition to joining Pisgah Area Sorba as your chapter, you can also consider just doing a direct donation. Joining as a chapter, some of that money does go to Sorba Maine, and it does go to the insurance. If you want to put money directly into the trails here, you can just do a donation, and Pisgah Area Sorba keeps 100% of that money. If you want to know how to do that, just go to the website. There's a link to how you can join, how you can get involved. It explains everything right there.
Seems to wrap it up pretty good. Speaking of some encouragement and less criticism, I feel like you and I are due for some bike rides here soon.
Man, we are. You got any ideas?
Well, the weather has been keeping us down, so I think you and I need to go do a dumb gravel adventure or something. We haven't gotten really deep in the forest in a while.
Something to 1206 to, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a good time to ride gravel right now because, the trails are largely a mess and a lot of the gravel roads are closed.
So no cars.
So, yeah, exactly. No cars. And I don't know. It's beautiful out there right now. The views are long range as ever because all the leaves are off the trees. You can see looking glass from everywhere.
Right on, dude. Well, Daniel, thanks for taking the time to chat with us and kind of fill us in on what exactly Pisgah Area Sorbet is doing for our local trails.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Michael. And yeah, what you guys are doing with the podcast is pretty awesome. Definitely been enjoying listening to it. And yeah, what do you say at the end? Something about if you think you need to get back to the local trails, well, go do that, but also hit that like and subscribe button for the podcast.
Oh, you just stole Drew's line. He's going to be pissed.
Oh man, he's not even here to take it though. It's okay.
Right
I'm filling in for him, right?
Well, awesome. Well, Daniel, thanks for your time, and I'll text you later about a ride plan.
All right, sounds great, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about how long it's been since something new's been built in this area.
Yeah, I have to say I'm excited to see something new, but most importantly, I want people to know and understand what goes into the reasoning behind doing some of the trail reroutes and maintenance that they do, like the why.
And you can follow along with Pisgah Area Sorba on all their social channels, which they're pretty good at. Just search Pisgah Area Sorba on your platform of choice and find them. We'll also throw some links in the show notes.
Yeah, and I'd like to give a shout out to the Pisgah Cowboys. They're one of the trail crews down in Brevard area, and they do a lot of the work in the Front Range that, that area needs.
You can usually spot their tree trimmings with the PC carved into a log nearby.
Yep, I've definitely caught the PC carving on a few trees cut, like sycamore and some of those zones.
Heck yeah.
Weather outlook, we do this every week, and here in the winter, it's been a lot of the same. It's going to rain a lot. Be mindful of the trails you ride. Forecast-wise, every week it always changes because that's just how Pisgah is. But this week definitely has been a very wet one for us. It's been one of those slow, rainy, and 33-degree weeks. Had a little bit of sunshine today, but and the weekend looks to have the sunshine. But to me, this is another gravel weekend. There's some really cool spots to go explore out there. Go ride a forest road to go look at a new waterfall. It's worth it.
Yeah, do whatever you can to stay outside, but let's be mindful where we're riding.
All right, guys. Yeah, that wraps up this week's episode of the Pisgah Podcast. As always, we would love if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcast. And as always, you can find us on social media. Just search Pisgah Podcast.
And if you ever thought you needed to get back to the trails, do that, but also hit the subscribe button.
Yep, trying to snake it back.